property or did you violate my property? Well, it was kind of both at the same time, wasn't it? There's no clear property distinction. I can't say this was my mailbox. There is no defining line, no defining property line. So common law really cannot apply. You can't say this was my property and not yours. That is where equity law comes in. Under equity law, the judge has arbitrary power. The judge can decide what the result of the case is. Equity means fairness. So this is all supposed to be based on fairness. Defined by who? The judge. So, I mean, if you like the judge and you trust him, that may not be so bad. But, you know, if you don't trust the judge, you may be in for a real rude awakening. Now, if it's not going to be in equity court, then you drop down into admiralty court. What does admiralty and maritime make you think of? Water. All right is based on property. If I go out onto the ocean in my boat, who owns the ocean? Nobody. Nobody owns the ocean. There's no property. There's no land. I can say, this is my land, and the land's not going to move. When the tide comes in, the tide goes out, you know, nobody owns the ocean. And so you have a completely different body of law. When I go out onto a sailboat, I've said this several times, I don't know if any of you are sailors. Has anybody here heard the expression that the captain's word is law? Okay? It's not a euphemism. It doesn't mean, oh, the old man's just grouchy until he gets his second cup of coffee. It means the captain's word is law. It doesn't have to be right. He just has to be the captain. When he goes out into the ocean in his boat, he has a 40-foot floating country, or however big his boat is. It's his country, and he is a dictator. End of story. He doesn't have to be right. He can throw you in the brig for anything he wants. You have your hair part in the wrong side. Now, if I'm floating out there in the ocean in my boat, and I find another boat, and there's nobody on the boat, who owns it? The captain. This is called, what is this called? Salvage rights. Thank you. Another senior moment. Okay? It's salvage rights, finders, keepers. I found it, nobody else claimed it, it's mine. End of story. Is that the way we do things on land? No. This is the law of the sea. What is the Constitution? The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, based on property. Common law and admiralty law are supposed to stay apart, just like land and water. Admiralty law is allowed to come up on land as far as the high water mark, originally. Because what is the ocean used for? Do you live there? Heck no. So anybody who had a ship out on the ocean, you were selling stuff or taking it somewhere to be sold. Now, when we have the United States is different. We've got the Great Lakes. England doesn't have any Great Lakes. We've got all these rivers that England doesn't have. You can send your ships up and down these rivers inland. Well, gosh, that doesn't make any sense anymore. We can't say law of the sea. So now it is really the law of commerce. It's not so much where you are doing it, it's what you are doing. So you've got three. Now, are those the only bodies of law? Yeah, these are constitutional laws. Anything that is specified by the Constitution is constitutional. Anything which is prohibited by the Constitution is unconstitutional. What if something is not specified but not prohibited by the Constitution? What do we call that? It's extra constitutional. It's outside the constitutional, but it's not forbidden. One of your rights is the right to contract. You have an unlimited right to contract. House my dog sleeps in. You go, wow, it's a great deal. I mean, how big is the biggest doghouse you've ever seen? You know, about eBay, $200? Yeah, I can do that in a couple hours. Yeah, I'll do that. You sign the contract. And I walk you around the corner, and I show you this, 3-story mansion, 27 rooms. They go, well, this is the house my dog sleeps in. Guess what? You're in deep trouble because you got to paint that house for $200. Was that a good contract? No. Is your right to contract unlimited? Yes. That's why they say read the contract. They're not kidding. Now, that's common law, admiralty, and due process. Like I said, you have a right to common law process. The only time they can move it down is if the distinction of property is not clearly defined. Now, if we move to page 16, okay, Marbury versus Madison is a Supreme Court decision. It is a very important Supreme Court decision. Good and bad. Okay? The good news is that the decision of Marbury versus Madison in 1803 says, certainly all those who have framed written constitutions contemplate them as forming the fundamental and paramount law of the nation. And consequently, the theory of every such government must be that an act of the legislature repugnant to the Constitution is void. If it's unconstitutional, it was never a law to start with. That's the good news. The bad news is up and above that. It says the critical importance of Marbury is the assumption of several powers by the Supreme Court. The assumption of powers. They assume that we can do this. Prior to Marbury versus Madison, who decided what is and is not constitutional? Well, the question never came up. It's not listed in the Constitution. Article 3 is very short. It just says there is a Supreme Court. It doesn't say what they can or cannot do. And so John Marshall said, well, we're the Supreme Court. We are going to decide what is or is not constitutional. Okay, everybody just got on with them. They didn't have a better idea. So now, let's pretend, just for a minute, that the Supreme Court decides that the First Amendment does not give you a personal right to freedom of religion. You only have freedom of religion if you are Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish. Is that right? The Supreme Court said so. Does that make it the way things are? No. You have to remember, the Constitution says what the Supreme Court is. The Supreme Court does not get to say what the Constitution is. That would be circular logic. Who decides what is or is not constitutional? We, the people. Who created this thing in the first place? If we decide the Supreme Court is out to lunch, it's up to us to correct it. There's no formal way to do that, but we can amend or abolish the Constitution anytime we see fit. Well, let's rewrite Article 3. So, I've just gone over constitutional, unconstitutional, and extra-constitutional. Extra-constitutional is not specified nor prohibited by the Constitution. It is basically just in addition to. Now, there are some ideas that came about because of all this shipping. You're in England and you ship all your stuff to North America, and all the people buy it and pay you in gold, which is the only thing they would pay you with. And your boat is coming back to the United States, or to England from the United States, with all this gold. What happens if the boat sinks? Well, yeah, salvage rights. Anybody who can get the gold, it's yours. It's laying right down there where the Titanic is going to be. That gold is lost forever and ever and ever and ever, for all intents and purposes. So what they did was they set up insurance companies where you had limited liability. You have several shipping companies, and if my boat sinks, the other shipping companies are going to help me pay for it, so that I don't lose everything that I had with that one boat. Now, the bad news is that if one of their boats sinks, I've got to chip in money to help pay for theirs. That's limited liability. Now, in order to have that, you have to have a contract, and only under contract can you compel performance. If the Constitution protects your rights, is there anything there that says you got to come over and cut my grass? Can the Constitution, without paying you under the Constitution? No. I cannot compel performance unless there's a contract. So basically what they've done is they've set up contract law. Now, these concepts are very, very deep, and I have nearly enough time to cover them. However, I strongly recommend that when you continue your research, you continue your research on the various types of law. And if we flip back to page 16, the second paragraph there, if you want to understand the difference between common law, equity law, and admiralty law, I strongly recommend that you go to the internet, to this btialaska.net, and read the USA, the Republic is the house that no one lives in. It is a 58-page document that you can download for free. Don't give me, oh man, 58 pages? Oh, that's a lot. Okay, don't read it and let your liberties go down the toilet. Liberty is not going to be easy. Reading a 58-page document is the least of your worries. And it is at the very least that you can do to protect your liberty. And that will give you a very, very clear understanding of the different forms of law and how much of this derives from Roman civil law, where you have no rights. So, we want to continue law. This is not all of the law. It's the three that are constitutionally specified, but there are other laws. All the laws written by Congress since the Constitution was written are called statutes. Originally, they were organized by date. That was the law that we passed in 1789. That was the law that we passed in 1791. Well, when they weren't passing very many laws, that was easy. And then eventually, it was, gosh, was that the law that we passed on Monday or the one we passed on Tuesday? And then eventually, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, gosh, was that before or after lunch? I just can't remember all these laws we're passing. So they organized them by index. We have 50 titles. Those 50 titles are part of the United States Code. And you can download the United States Code off of the internet. And I give you a website on page 18. Basically at the bottom of page 18, you can download. The only thing is that you've got to download each title by itself. So it's a little bit monotonous, but you get all the information. You can also order a CD-ROM. I think it's about $35, $40. You can get it from the National Archive, and you'll have everything on one CD-ROM. Amazing stuff. I highly recommend it. Now, Within the United States Code, there are two types of law: positive law and non-positive law. Positive law applies to everybody. The Freedom of Information Act, Title V, that applies to everybody. Black, white, male, female, young, old, doesn't matter. It applies to you. Some of these laws are non-positive law. They don't apply to everybody. Title 27 of the United States Code is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Now, if you distill alcohol, or grow tobacco, or build guns, you fall under alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Then you have to pay special taxes. Anybody here distill alcohol, grow tobacco, build guns for a living? Okay. Well, if you don't do any of those things, then Title 27 does not apply to you. And it is non-positive law. It only applies to people who do those special things. Now, if it is positive law, it says so. You go to Title V, it says, this is positive law. Right there at the top. Well, you can go through the 50 titles, and I have given you a list of all the positive law titles. These are the laws that you apply to you and absolutely must be followed. Okay? And out of the 50 possible titles, only 22 have been enacted into positive law. Can you find Title 27? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms? No, because it's not positive law. Please find Title 26, Internal Revenue. 23, 28, 26 should fall right in between there someplace. Title 26 is not positive law. It does not apply to everyone. And your question is, who does it apply to? And it's a perfectly valid question. Okay, one that we're going to be asking the IRS here very, very soon. But basically, the people who are liable for income tax are non-resident aliens, foreign corporations, and United States citizens living and working in a foreign country. So if that doesn't describe who you are, then you are not liable to the Title 26 tax code, which is a shock and a surprise to many people, although not in this group. Now, one of the interesting things is that the current federal income tax regulations define gross income to mean all income from whatever source derived, unless excluded by law. So there are some incomes which are not gross income. The regulations explain that the items of income compensation for services make up classes, and then regulations direct the reader to another section which provide classes. A class of gross income may be excluded income, and that leads to a section. It's very, very convoluted. I mean, they can't just say it in black and white because then you'd know. They've got to go jump from here to there and make it really complicated. But eventually, you find out that this leads to a section where the types of income that are not considered to be exempt, eliminated, or excluded are listed. And the list only includes income from certain types of international and foreign commerce. How many people here are doing international or foreign commerce? I didn't think so. So, what you can do, for those of you who are interested in a long list of websites that you can do research in or at, establishing basically what the tax code is, what it says, and I'd like to repeat the 3 rules listed over the side. Person exercise his or her rights in the face of government should be careful to pay attention to three rules. Rule number one, protect your property. Rule number three is take action. Do not do them in the reverse order. The government does not play fair. They do not play nice. If you are going to do this at all, be prepared for the ride of your life, because it's going to take pretty much all of your energy. Now, most of the law here in the United States falls under the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. Now, uniform means the same, or, basically everything is alike. What they did in the early 1930s is to take equity law, where the judge has an arbitrary decision, and admiralty law, and combine them together into the UCC, uniform. So that equity and admiralty are now the same. That makes everything a lot more convenient, doesn't it? Convenient for whom? Convenient for you? No, the people who are taking advantage of it. This is Uniform Commercial Code. What does commerce mean? Trade, contract. And code is not law, necessarily. It's, it's convoluted, it's cryptic, and it's hard to understand. Now, under common law, the presumption is that you have rights, unless you voluntarily waive them. All of your rights are protected except the ones you give up. Under the Uniform Commercial Code, the opposite is true. Under the Uniform Commercial Code, it is assumed that you have no rights unless you explicitly reserve them. Say, oh, by the way, I've got all my constitutional rights. Oh, by the way, I have freedom of speech. Now, how do you do that? If you are in a Uniform Commercial Code contract, you need to go to Section 1, Clause 207, which is defined on page 19. UCC 1-207, performance or acceptance under reservation of rights. A party who, with explicit reservation of rights, performs or promises performance or assents to performance in a manner demanded or offered by the other party, does not thereby prejudice the rights reserved. Such words as without prejudice or under protest or the like are sufficient. So you just have to say out loud or in writing that you are reserving your rights. Now, why do they have to do that? They have to do that because any body of law, in order to be valid, must have two items: remedy and recourse. Remedy means that you are able to get out of trouble once you get into trouble. So if you're going to put me in jail, if I broke something, I've got to have some way I can fix it. Everybody hear of debtor's prison? Debtor's prison, you owe me money. Well, I'm going to put you in jail until you pay me my money back. You're in jail. How are you going to go out and get any money? Well, that's your problem. Kind of a catch-22, isn't it? And so you just had all the prisons just filling up with all these people who couldn't pay their debt, which is now completely, totally illegal. Now, the other option, the other thing that law must have is recourse. You have to have some way to stay out of trouble in the first place. It's like, okay, you just tell me what I'm going to do so I don't get put in jail overnight in the first place. That's recourse. And that's what UCC 1-207 is. They've got it all the rules are set up so they win the game. Mostly because we didn't tell you the rules. Is the UCC unconstitutional? No. Is it specified by the Constitution? No. It makes it extra constitutional. It is out there in addition to the Constitution. Do you have a right to sign contracts under the UCC? Yes. Your right to contract is unlimited. You can sign any contract you want. You just have to know that you've done it. And they're not telling you. Now, what generally happens under the UCC is something called notice and grace. I have to inform you of what's going on, and I have to give you some time period for you to respond. So I send you a letter. Dear Joe, you owe me $1,000. Love, Mike. And I mail you this letter. You go, $1,000? I don't even know, Mike. And you just wrinkle it up and you throw it in the garbage can. You figure this is just, like some hoax. Well, in my letter, it says, please pay me within 30 days. Please respond in 30 days. And if you just wrinkle it up and throw it in the garbage can, I show up 31 days later with the sheriff. And the sheriff will legally take the $1,000 from you. I gave you notice. I told you that you owed me $1,000. I gave you a grace period. I gave you 30 days to respond. Well, you didn't respond, so it must have been true. So your response is always respond. If I send you a bill for $1,000, sit down at the typewriter, computer, mail it back going, what? I challenge that. What you can do is refuse without dishonor. You say, I don't owe you anything. Now whose job is it to prove that I gave you some sort of service? It's my job. That's what the IRS does. The IRS sends you a notice. They give you 10 days to respond. If you don't respond, you must be guilty. Don't be afraid of the IRS. Just write them a letter back within the first 10 days. Write them a letter back within the first 10 days. Challenge their authority. Say, no, I don't owe you this money. Prove it. Oh, well, gosh, that's going to be a heck of a lot harder. Gosh, if you want us to prove it, then we're not going to be able to collect the taxes. Good. We're also, okay, we need to audit you to prove it. That's my fear. What's your Fifth Amendment right? Go ahead, audit. I've got a Fourth Amendment right to be secure in my person's house's papers and effects, and a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate myself. I've got my, checkbook and stuff. I don't have to give it to you. I don't have to sign my 1040 form. If I sign it under penalty of perjury, must be true. Well, if I don't sign it, let me see. I don't have to give you, the government, anything that you can use to put me in jail. If I sign my 1040 form and give it to you, can you use that to put me in jail? Yes. Then I don't have to sign it. If you show me, Judge, how I can sign that without giving up my Fifth Amendment rights, then I'll sign it. But they can't do that. Bill Conklin has a website, and he did that, and the judge says, I cannot rule on your case. He didn't say you have a lousy argument. He just said, I can't rule on your case because if I do, it's going to completely flip the whole economic system. Oh, so my rights are going to be violated because it's going to be embarrassing for you? That's what's going to be happening in a couple of weeks when we, bring the IRS. We are doing an IRS audit. Bring in your paperwork. You show us where the law says we've got to pay this cash. Now, I think the IRS is on their way out. The IRS, by its own statistics, say that 1 out of 5 people does not pay taxes. We've stopped volunteering. It's about time. 98%. It took us a while to figure it out. I think I don't know the exact statistic. I think it is 1 out of 5 people the IRS claims should be. Okay? If you go by my statistics, everybody who's paying taxes should be. So I think the IRS is out to lunch. You don't have to worry about the IRS anymore. What you do have to worry about is what they're going to replace it with. National sales tax? Oh, that's better. You got rid of the lion, we have the tiger. Well, that's stupid. You know, which Menendez brother do you want to live with? We've got to make sure that they get rid of the IRS and that they do not institute a national sales tax, because the national sales tax is only 10%, no, 11%, I'm sorry, 12%, 20, 15, you know, and pretty soon before you know it, it's going to be 50. You know, as far as I'm concerned, the only flat tax I'm in favor of is a flat tax which is 0. So how are we going to operate the United States without an income tax? I don't know. How did we do it before the IRS? July 4th, we got the Declaration of Independence. July 5th, we got the IRS. I don't think so. When did the IRS happen?
1943, they started taking out our checks.
Well, they started taking it out of our checks, but the IRS came into existence in 1913. So between 1776 and 1913, there was no income tax. There was no inflation. Go figure. George Washington paid the same amount of money for a loaf of bread that Abraham Lincoln did. No inflation. So then what's Alan Greenspan talking about? You have to have 5% inflation every year. I'll get into more of that a little bit later. So we've got the United States Code, which is congressional statute, but you actually have to read it, and not all of it applies to you. The other stuff is the Uniform Commercial Code, which is private law. It's a copyright. Can you use somebody else's book without their permission? No. Can you use somebody else's law without their permission? No. How do you get permission? Become a lawyer. When you become a member of the bar, then you get permission to execute their code. Now, I've also got a site here on the web, the internet, where you can go and download the Uniform Commercial Code for $5. You can't afford not to download it. You need to have that so that you can go and reference this stuff. You start reading it, it's like they've got it in writing. And you go, I can't believe it's in print. But it is, it's law. It is a law that you volunteer into it. How do you volunteer into the Uniform Commercial Code? Anybody spend these? Anybody recognize this? What is this? It's a note. Every time you spend one of these, you are automatically de facto under Uniform Commercial Code. Now, what is common law? Common law is based on property or land. Now, when you are under property, your economy is quid pro quo. That is quid pro quo. That is Latin, which means something for something. You gave me silver, which is something I gave you a book. That's quid pro quo. If I give you, you have an apple, and I want to buy your apple, and I say, well, you know, I don't have any money on mine. Would you take an IOU? You go, oh, okay, yeah, you can do that. And you give me the apple, I give you the IOU. Have we completed the transaction? No. Have I given you anything? Well, nothing of any value. All I've given you is a promise to pay. So that transaction is still open. And that's what's happened when you use these notes. You are under You are not under common law because it's not quid pro quo. You are automatically under the Uniform Commercial Code. No, not at all. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail.
Buy property, and you say, I'm on your property, and there was a Federal Reserve note.
Well, that's why you never own it.
No, but they're willing to take those.
Well, you're not giving them anymore because you did not give anything of substance. When you get your manufacturer's statement of origin, I would give them silver.
When I bought my property,
I know what you're telling me,
Reserve note, they said, great, it's yours.
but you didn't buy the property. You don't own it in a loyal title. You don't own it. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the Federal Reserve. And that's a whole special topic. Any questions on Article 3 and the different classes of law? Yeah.
Now, when I was researching that recently, I understood positive laws to be all those laws that are reviewed, code, that they're as close and complete as statute was, that are considered positive law. However, not all of the code has been researched and said that they're completely safe.
Okay.
So those are not positive.
Okay.
It didn't have anything to do with who they applied to.
Okay.
When I read this definition,
Well, I'd like to see your definition because I'm always willing to learn. I mean, there's stuff that I can be telling you that's wrong. I'm not deliberately giving you any bad information. I just don't know everything.
well, like you have the definition here about positive law.
Well, I've gotten that.
Is that your definition?
I've gotten it out of Black's. The top part is Black's law. The bottom part is my interpretation and understanding of it.
So you're saying your understanding is that statutes have been reviewed.
No, a statute is law. Code is a reflection of the statute.
That's what I'm trying to think.
Right.
It's not
It's not exact. And so whatever the code says, you got to trace that back to the actual statute. Now, the United States Code is statute. Now, all of the titles are statute law. It's not code. You have to have a enabling clause and an effective date. Right. Okay. But there is a difference between whatever the difference is. You know, there are differences, and not all of the titles apply are like positive law. So your definition, I mean, I don't know how I would interpret that. How does that apply to
So like in Title 26, they have whoever, and I did read who they empowered to go through the research, has not gone through all of Title 26 and say this section accurately reflects the statute.
Now, what is the statute?
But see, when you look at the code, because it's not positive law, you really know the law and you have to go.
I'm asking you, what is the statute?
But the section of the code reflects statute, different statutes.
Okay, it's a reflection. So I've got Title 26, which is United States Code. Where do I go for the statute? What is that?
It's a compilation of several statutes, lots of statutes that have been passed over time, categorize all the tax codes in Title 26. All the different statutes over all the different years just get categorized in Title 26.
Well, I'll research that. I'll research that a little bit deeper.
Michael, I'm not sure, I'm not gonna speak for today, but I read the same thing. And where I got the information, I was on one of the legal websites that ties into the government site where the US code is listed. And this was contained as general information.
That's probably where I read it. I read a lot of it.
It was on one of the general information screens that you go to before you get into the document.
I'll go and research that a little bit more. Because I've never heard that information. Most people I know don't even know that the United States Code exists.
So that's why it's like when they refer to code in some law case lawsuit,
Yeah,
if it's already, positive law, then there's really no sense in going to the
Right.
proof it is.
okay. I mean, that sounds plausible. I'll check into that. Thank you. That was Article 3. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll come back and pick up with Article 4, because that's going to be a long one. Right. We've managed to squeeze our way through the first 3 articles of the Constitution: legislative, judicial, or legislative, executive, and judicial. Now we're going to go on to Article 4. Article 4 basically talks about how the states and the federal government were going to interact, and it also sets up state citizens. Let's go to page 33 and read Article 4, Section 2. It says, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. Notice, please, that the word citizen is capitalized. Okay? And you are a citizen of capitalized. Okay? And you are a citizen of each state. So let's fill in the blanks. A citizen of Texas shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities as citizens of Florida, citizens of California, citizens of Oklahoma. What kind of citizens are we talking about? State citizens. When the founding fathers got together to form the Constitution, Benjamin Franklin would stand up and introduce himself as a citizen of Pennsylvania. Thomas Jefferson was a citizen of Virginia. You were a citizen of your state. A United States citizen was just kind of an abstract concept. It's like one of those many. We're not going to list all 50 of them. So it's an abstract concept. So, but you have privileges and immunities. Is that good to have privileges? Well, it depends. What it was doing, if you are a citizen of Texas, are you a citizen of Oklahoma? No. Okay? So when you go from the United States to France, do you get all of the things that French citizens do? No, because you're out of your territory. So if you are a Texas citizen and you go to Oklahoma, you don't have all the same rights that Oklahoma citizens do, except for Section 2, which says that you will have all the privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states. So legally, you don't have rights, but we're going to extend you those same privileges, so that basically it's, all 50 states are the same. But you are a state citizen, and they are extending you these privileges when you go to the other states. Now let's go to the 14th Amendment on page 48. The 14th Amendment, Section 1, says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Well, that doesn't sound terribly onerous, does it? That sounds pretty simple. Okay? But let's look at citizens of the United States. That's a lowercase c. And they left out the word citizen the second time, but it's you're a citizen of the United States and a citizen of the state wherein you reside. So what is that? That's dual citizenship, isn't it? You're a United States citizen and a state citizen. Well, which one comes first? United States citizen. So in that clause, which one takes precedence? United States citizen. Well, it still doesn't sound too bad, except when you go back and read the second line. It says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What do the people in England call living under the king? Subject. Do they have any say-so? No, the king says you're going to do this or else. A subject has no rights. You want to be subject to anybody? I don't. Now, the fact that it's a lowercase c is not, a mistake. It also says all persons born or naturalized in the United States. What's a person? Oh, good. So if we look at page 20 in your handout, a person, and this is from Black's Law Dictionary. In general usage, a human being, i.e. a natural person. So when we are talking in conversation, we mean, warm flesh and blood body. Though, by statute, the term may include labor organizations, partnerships, associations, corporations, legal representatives, trustees in bankruptcies or receivers. See 29 U.S.C. 152. That's Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 152. And the scope and delineation of the term is necessary for determining those to whom 14th Amendment of the Constitution affords protection, since this amendment expressly applies to person. A corporation is a person within the meaning of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection and Due Process Clause. So Ford Motor Company is a person. Microsoft is a person. For legal terms, isn't that wonderful? You get all the same privileges as Microsoft. Now, what is a juristic person? If I decide that we're all going to go into business together, we have to sign we put an ad in the newspaper for several weeks in a row. It says our little group is doing business as Acme Fireworks. So 7-8 weeks later, whatever the time frame is, we have a company, Acme Fireworks. Do you know that Acme Fireworks is born? That's the terminology. This company is now born. Now, is Acme Fireworks human? Does it have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, a right to keep and bear arms? No. It's an artificial entity. It has whatever privileges that you and I and the state of Texas give it. A jurist is another word for the judge. The jury are the 12 people sitting there in the box. Anything which is juristic has to do with court. A juristic person is this artificial entity. Now, if I take us out in the parking lot here and I'm demonstrating my latest bottle rocket, and it works really, really good, except it burns down somebody's barn. Does the owner of the barn have a right to sue Acme Fireworks? Yes. How many people are suing Firestone Tires for their bad tires? So Acme Fireworks, for the purposes of court, can go to court just like you or I could. It is a juristic person, artificial entity. Now, with the 14th Amendment, the Congress has invented a juristic person. It is a non-existent corporation. So, we, the people, ordain and establish the Constitution. When we do that, we create Congress. So, who works for who? Congress works for us. They are subordinate to us. When Congress basically or presumably ratified the 14th Amendment, they created a U.S. citizen. Now, what status does a United States citizen have to Congress? All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction. You are subordinate to Congress if you're a United States citizen. So this is a second class of citizen. It was generated just after the Civil War, basically to give blacks privileges. So we thought that the 13th Amendment freed the blacks and brought them up to our level, except the 14th Amendment basically lowered all the whites down to their level. You have privileges. You don't have rights. The moment that you are born and they lay you on your mother's chest, you are we the people, sovereign citizen. Suddenly, somehow or other, we go magically down to becoming a United States citizen. How does that happen? Birth certificate, social security number, driver's license, voter's registration card. Voter registration card, are you a United States citizen? Yes or no? Oh yeah, I'm a United States citizen. Oh boy, you have no rights. We the people have a right to keep and bear arms. A United States citizen has to get a concealed carry permit. We the people have a right to travel. A United States citizen has to get a driver's license. We the people can get married to anybody we want. A United States citizen has to get a marriage license. Those are all prima facie evidence of your subordinate status to Congress. The trick is getting rid of all of that.
Since that says born or naturalized in the United States, capital letters, wouldn't that be places they have like DC and territories only?
That's right. Say the United States. I have another document that I literally just printed off the web yesterday. I'm constant. Again, there's too much information, so I keep adding more. But I downloaded a document that talks about the United States, the United States, and the United States of America, three different entities, and the citizenships of each of those. And I would have added to the book. The best I can do is to give you the website before we leave.
Right? And the 14th doesn't apply to sovereign.
If you are a sovereign Texan, you are not a United States citizen. You never ever want to say, yes, I'm a United States citizen, because you are admitting that you are subordinate to Congress. I am not a United States citizen. I am a Texan. You become an elector. Okay? What's that? Oh, do they? I didn't know that they had. So they're trying to close doors on us before we finally get there. Right. It's not. So, United States citizen is different than a state citizen. A state citizen has rights protected by the Bill of Rights. A United States citizen basically has equal protection under the law. You want equal protection? That guy's got a ball and chain. You want to be equal? It just says that it's equal. It doesn't say that it was good. So we're going to give you a ball and chain too. That way everybody's equal. Now, on my passport, I have reproduced what it says. It says the Secretary of State of the United States of America hereby requests all to whom it may concern to prevent the citizen/national of the United States. What does it mean when you have two words divided by a slash? One or the other. You can be boy/girl. You can be Democrat/Republican. One or the other. You can be citizen/national. So this passport will work for United States citizen, but it will also work for United States national. They don't tell you what that is, but on my passport it shows that they are different. Now, what is a national? A person owning permanent allegiance to the state. The term national, as used in the phrase national of the United States, is broader than the term citizen. So a rectangle can be a square, but a square is not necessarily a rectangle. A rectangle is a broader term. So if you are a national, it is a broader term than the word citizen. So it is possible for you to be a national and not be a United States citizen. Shh, don't tell anybody. We wouldn't want you to be able to exercise your rights. Now, again, the reference that I gave you before, the USA, the House Republic is the USA, the Republic is the house that no one lives in, is the document. And this is a short subset, and it says the 14th Amendment is a setback from proper government. It runs counter to the ideals expressed in the preamble to the Constitution itself. The 14th Amendment is also probably never properly ratified. So the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are post-war amendments that basically gave Congress a lot of power. Presumably the North over the South, but we've managed to exacerbate that into being even worse. Article 5 of the Constitution. The founding fathers realized they were not omniscient. They knew that we would have to change it. So Article 5 is all about amending the Constitution. How do you go about changing it? Well, the first thing that you have to do is propose an amendment. How can you propose an amendment? Either 2/3 of both houses or 2/3 of the state conventions. Do we have to have Congress? No. We can get each state to hold a convention, and if you get 2/3 of those conventions to say, yes, we want this proposal, then it is proposed. You can bypass Congress. We, the people, still have some power. We just have to get our act together and get organized. Now, once an amendment has been proposed, how does it become ratified? 3/4 of all the states. So you need 3/4 of the state legislatures. It's true. So you need a super majority. Oh yes, and we will talk about that. You can also have 3/4 of the state conventions. We can bypass the state legislature, have a convention, and if 3/4 of the people's in the states want it, then the amendment is also ratified. But it's 2/3 or 66% to propose it and 75% to ratify it. They deliberately made it hard. They didn't want it to be real easy. Number 5, Article 5 is on page 35. It says all deaths and engagements shall be valid. Why did they have to put that in? Why is that in Article 5?
We got that just a bit.
Sure.
Okay, in Article 5, at the bottom, it says, no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. And yet, they passed an amendment in which some states would have to be unanimous for it to be legal. And some states did not pass it, so they lost their suffrage without their consent.
And it's up to Constitution. Which have to be.
I'm talking about, it's over here where the senators are elected by the.
17th Amendment.
Yes.
We're going to talk about the 17th Amendment. Article 6 says that all debts, contracted, and engagements entered into before the adoption of the Constitution shall be valid. So we were changing governments. We were under the Articles of Confederation, and we owed a bunch of money to France and Spain for, helping us out. So when we go to the new Constitution, we say, well, we're going to be good guys, and we're going to, continue our debt. We're not just going to repudiate debt. But basically, it says all laws pursuant to the Constitution and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority shall be the supreme law of the land. So the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any law notwithstanding is invalid, it's unconstitutional. So Texas can make any law that it wants, except a law that would legalize slavery, or otherwise violate your rights. And then it's also said that all persons, senators and members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by an oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So, again, we're supporting this trust idea. You got to take an oath. You got to promise to protect people's rights. But no oath or affirmation, but no religious test shall ever be required. So, we can't eliminate certain religions, or even atheists. You can't have a religious test. Article 7 is basically just signed, sealed, delivered by yours. It just says the 17th day of September, 1787, blah, 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 and this is, done good. So the 7th Amendment is mostly signatures. And the 6th Amendment, or the 6th article is relatively short. So the three that are, typically important are 1, 2, and 3, legislative, executive, judicial. 4 establishes the relationship between the states and the federal. 5 is how do you amend it. 6 is we're going to keep our debts, and 7 is we're out of here. Put your signature down. Well, I'm just telling you what the Constitution says. I didn't say that I like all of it. Yeah, that may be true. Yeah. Whatever the debts were prior, during the Articles of Confederation, those were all valid. So we were not going to be real scumbags and eliminate the debt just by refusing to pay. So, now, before it would be ratified, several of the states demanded that we have a Bill of Rights. It gives a whole lot of power to the federal government, and we're worried about that. And so we wanted, and they said, well, you've got your rights. And Alexander Hamilton said, don't worry about it. You don't need to put it on paper. Yeah, right. We want it in writing. So, most people know that the Constitution has a preamble. Most people do not know that the Bill of Rights also has a preamble. I was reading that in some book. It said the preamble of the Bill of Rights. They went, oh, typo. They meant the Bill of Rights, preamble to the Constitution. And they started giving me something I'd never read before, and I jumped up because I've got the Constitution and the Bill of Rights hanging in my hallway. And I went over and looked at it, and I went, I'll be go to hell. Look at that. So, the preamble to the Bill of Rights, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution, obstruction or abuse of its power, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extended in ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficial ends of this institution. So what? So we wrote the Bill of Rights to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. Whose powers? Congress, government. Okay? So we don't want them to get out of hand. So what are we going to do? We are going to add further declaratory and restrictive clauses. Does a declaratory clause ask for permission? No. I'm telling you that I've got freedom of speech. I'm telling you that I've got a right to keep bear arms. I'm not asking. These are further restrictive clauses. We're putting restrictions on the power of government. What are the original restrictive clauses? The Constitution. So the Constitution are restrictions on Congress's power, and we're going to add further restrictions. The Bill of Rights cannot be repealed. You can't go ahead and say, well, we're just going to scratch out the Second Amendment. We don't need that anymore. Wait a minute. You didn't give it to us in the first place. You can't take it back. We gave it to you. We are telling you that we have freedom of religion, not asking. So, I'm going to stop that. We can get an amendment to change the Bill of Rights like we have other amendments. No, that is not true. You can get amendments to change the other amendments. The 18th Amendment established prohibition, the 21st Amendment repealed it. But that has nothing to do with rights. If we can change, let's talk about Rosie O'Donnell, because we're going to talk about all of these amendments. Right? Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. Rosie O'Donnell and her million moms want to go to Washington, and they say, all we got to do is just get enough moms to vote, and we're going to just repeal the Second Amendment, and we're going to take away, your right to keep and bear arms. Okay, let's take that and say, you're going to repeal my Second Amendment, so I'm going to go to Washington with my billion fathers, and we're going to repeal we're going to repeal the First Amendment. We're just going to take away your freedom of religion. You going to do that? You going to sit still for any of that? I say you can't go to church unless you're, Branch Davidian. Ever going to change over to Branch Davidian? No. We didn't give you freedom of religion. You were born with it. Nobody can take it away from you. It is unalienable. It's a part of who you are. It's like the dreams that you had last night. You can tell me your dreams, but you can't give them to me. It's integral to who you are. You've got a heart, you've got lungs. You give me any of that, you stop existing. I can kill you, but I can't take away your right to life. I can violate your right to life, but I can't take it away from you. They cannot take away your freedom of religion, your freedom of speech, or a right to keep and bear arms. The Bill of Rights doesn't give it to you in the first place. If we don't stop it. They can burn it. They can shred it. They can get rid of the Declaration of Independence. It doesn't make your rights go away. So let them make any changes they want. They can shred the Bill of Rights. They're ignoring it so much anyway. The Constitution is only a national monument, under nitrogen gas in Washington, D.C. It's a novelty. It is something to look at. Here, kids. What's it say, Dad? I don't know. It's the Bill of Rights. You think I know what the heck the Bill of Rights says? I went to a government-controlled school. I have no idea what my rights are. I don't have a concealed carry permit. Won't get one, don't want one, don't need one. Don't need permission from anybody. People say, well, the interpretation of the Supreme Court is the only one that counts when we're talking about the Second Amendment. Oh, really? Well, then you come and stand in front of my front door when the government comes to collect my guns. You're going to find out that my interpretation of the Second Amendment is the only one you need to be worried about. Make sure you got your insurance paid up and kiss your kids goodbye. I'm not giving up my guns any more than I'm willing to give up my freedom of speech. Shred it. I don't care. It's a piece of paper. I am willing to stand up and defend my rights, whether anybody else does or not. And again, I ask you, how bad does it have to be before you are willing to stand up and fight for your rights? You got to know what they are. It's not a privilege. Nobody gave it to you. Enumerated by the Bill of Rights. They are listed. Just why? So that we know what they are? Well, today, yeah. Most of us have got to read it to find out what they are. Why did we list them? Did we list them for us? No, we listed them for the government. It says these are the things us off. So let's go through them rather quickly and briefly. Page 43. And if you are going to continue your study, I hope you will, what I would recommend that you start with is to memorize the Bill of Rights. Oh man, I gotta memorize something again. I feel like I'm in school. Okay, how much is your liberty worth? Okay. Crystal has shirts with, the Bill of Rights, and there's all printed upside down. So when you want to find out what one of them is, you just gotta bend over and look at your belly. Oh, there it is. Marie has one on. There it is. We have one right there. Yeah. So, First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. They should have put a period. End of story. Congress shall make no law. I'm happy. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Say anything about separation? No. There's nothing in the Constitution that says separation of church and state. That's the wild figment of somebody's imagination. I have no problem with people having the 10 Commandments in school. What bothers me even more is there's a school in Georgia that is prohibiting the display of the Declaration of Independence. If you can't have the Declaration of Independence in school, what can you have? Yeah. Or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. These are personal rights. You have freedom of speech only in Scrabble and crossword puzzles? You only have freedom of speech in the things that I agree with? No. If that was the only thing, you wouldn't need freedom of speech because we agree. You have freedom of speech even when somebody else, oh my gosh, I'm going to toss and turn all night. What you say just drives me crazy. I won't be able to sleep tonight. Too bad. It's a personal problem. That's what freedom of speech is. So, petition the government for a redress of grievances. We can sue the government and presumably win. The government works for us. One of the things that they're doing right now is they're taking a remonstrance to Washington. A remonstrance is a word you don't hear very much anymore, but it's a formal complaint against the government. And in this particular case, it's all about the IRS. Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. To say anything about the National Guard? No. You say, well, wait a minute, what is that well-regulated militia? Well, today, well-regulated means lots and lots of laws. Back in 1776, well-regulated means well-prepared. You got a pound of powder and 16 balls for your rifle, and you know how to use it. Where do you think the Minutemen came from? You hear the bugle call, you grab your gun and you go. You're ready on a moment's notice. That is well regulated. All this talk about, well, militia means National Guard. The Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791. The National Guard didn't show up until the early 1900s. You telling me the Founding Fathers were premonition? Most people forget that the United States started when the British tried to take our guns and conquered Lexington. We said, hell no. Texas started out when the Mexicans wanted their cannon back. What did we say? Come and get it. Third Amendment. You probably never hear of the Third Amendment being put to use. It says, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Well, unless they change the way our soldiers fight, you don't have to worry about that. But back then, the army traveled on its stomach. They'd stop in town, stop marching, they'd say, okay, dismissed. The soldiers would go knock on the door and say, okay, I'm sleeping in your bed, you're sleeping on the floor. Oh, really? Yeah, I got the gun. So, what's that? Yeah, well, armies, any army, you know, if you were a civilian, you were basically just, you know, stores. That's right. So you'd be, you know, overrun by your, you know, stores. That's right. So you'd be, you know, overrun by your army and the opposing army. So that probably won't happen anymore. The Fourth Amendment, very important. It protects your privacy. It says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated. And no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. They have to have a piece of paper. You want to search? A, you have to have probable cause. What makes you think I've got anything? 2, you have to have a warrant. 3, the warrant has to be signed under oath or affirmation. Why? Because if you break down my door and you don't find what you're looking for, somebody lied. Somebody is guilty of perjury. And we go back to the First Amendment, and I'm petitioning the government for a redress of grievances. So we force the government to get an oath. We don't want the government just coming in and go, well, I think we're going to look around just in case. Can't do that. And if you let them, if they stop you on the side of the highway and say, can I look in your car? You go, yes, officer. You just gave them permission. No. You want to show me a warrant? Well, we're going to have to keep you here for 3 hours until we get one. Fine. I got nothing to do. Go get a warrant. And when you don't find what you're looking for, be prepared for a lawsuit. You do that 2 or 3 times, and they're not going to check your car anymore. Yes. Now they're going to argue that if you have a driver's license, that you have given them permission in advance, okay, by contract. Okay. Well, don't show them the license. Or get rid of it. Well, if they've got it registered right. Okay. So basically, you've got to be careful. You know, if you are a United States citizen, you have no rights. You are property. And you've got to do whatever they say. You are subject to the jurisdiction of Congress. So stop being a United States citizen. That's a completely different class. Get around it. Fifth Amendment. When everybody says, I plead the Fifth, okay, they're talking about one line in this amendment. You look at that entire paragraph, is that, I plead the Fifth? No. There's a lot of stuff here. You have a lot of rights. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment by a grand jury. Only people in the grand jury can indict you. The government can't come along and throw you in jail for anything you want. You have to have other Texans who said, yeah, that sounds pretty bad. Except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia with an actual service in time of war or public danger. So do soldiers and sailors have a right to all this other stuff? No. If you're a soldier or a sailor, you don't have a right to a trial. You go to a court-martial, which is completely different. You have no rights. If you're in the militia, when in actual service, you're acting as a soldier. So you get court-martialed too. Now, nor shall any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. They can't hold you on the same thing. You know, they accuse you of murder, they accuse you of killing John, and if John shows up alive, well, you didn't do it. They can't accuse you of it again. That was what the whole movie, Double Jeopardy, was all about. Really good theory. Now, nor be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. That's the fifth that everybody remembers. It also says, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. They can't take all your stuff away from you and say, okay, we're going to take you to court. How are you going to defend yourself? You have to have due process of law. What? Admiralty jurisdiction.
I do this administrative law.
That's right. It's all administrative law, statutes, under the UCC. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. A lot of people go into court and they say, you're not my kind of rights. The judge says, don't let me hear you talk about the Constitution again. What's the matter? I thought this was the United States. No, not the United States that you're thinking of. Sorry, and you lose because you didn't know the game. You're standing on a baseball diamond going touchdown. They go, we don't know what you're talking about. They pulled a fast switch on you. You've got to learn the law. You've got to know your rights. You have to know where you stand. And your citizenship is a lot to do with where you stand. Finally, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Great. Who gets to decide what's just? Maybe a jury. That might help. But they can't just come in because the freeway's coming through and take your farm.
Find out.
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. It's all based on property. Private property. What's that? Well, the Constitution doesn't specify, does it? So it's kind of like a little loophole. Wait till we get to the 8th Amendment. The 6th Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. Why is a public trial important? Yeah, we don't want to drag you off into a dark thing. Oh, he ended up dead. He was guilty. Really? What happened? What did he was his secret. You don't want to see that. Okay? They used to do that. Still do that if you ever have a run-in with the IRS. We've got 3 kids in jail in Austin who were in jail because one guy confessed with a gun to his head.